welcome to 3 Count Commentary. We're going to talk about a fun episode of NXT from August the 20th, 2024. We got news and notes, but we're going to save that for later. We're going to talk about TNA. The wrestlers actually like the partnership with NXT. And we're going to talk about Joe Hendry. Some people think that he's overexposed. So we're going to talk about those things later. But let's get through this episode first. The parking lot strikes again with Carmen Petrovic. She was attacked in the NXT parking lot by Izzy Dame, who smashed her hand on the roof of a car. Later, it was decided by Ava that Carmen Petrovic could not perform. Izzy Dame wanted to take that spot, but Ava didn't want to reward her bad behavior. So she just gave it to Brinley Reese instead, which is a waste of a spot. Why didn't Izzy Dame just beat up Brinley Reese too? I mean, that would have been a great thing, right? Anyway, this brings us to the third match on the show, which was the Gauntlet Eliminator. It was not the way that I thought it was going to go, which I'm very glad, because I thought it was going to be a regular Gauntlet match where, you know, it's one-on-one, somebody gets pinned, and another person comes in. Instead, it was Rumble-style elimination. So anybody could pin anybody at any time, and it was still elimination, but it was 6 people. Adriana Rizzo, who was eliminated by Sol Ruca via powerbomb. It was a pretty ugly powerbomb, too. It was Ren Sinclair, who was pinned by Sol Ruca with the Soul Snatcher. It was Brinley Reese, who was defeated by Kendall Gray. Kendall Gray was in the match. I missed how she lost. And the winner was Jada Parker, who defeated Sol Ruca in the final. So Jada Parker is the winner of the match, which is a great decision. The only problem I had is that she came in last, because it made it just a little bit anticlimactic with her coming in last. She pinned Sol Ruca with the Hypnotic after Sol Ruca missed a springboard splash. So Jada Parker was very excited. She told me she was hype and that she's a difference maker, and she got next. It seems like she's going to be turning babyface so that this thing can work, because her and Roxanne Perez should be a fun match. This is a huge step up for Jada Parker. And I kind of figured Jada Parker or Sol Ruca would win. They're the most individualized of all of the women that were in this match. All these other women, I couldn't tell them apart. Like Brinley Reese and Kendall Gray and Izzy Dame, all these bras look the same. Somebody needs to get a haircut. Somebody needs to do something and just look different. Everybody looks the same. But the match itself was fine. I didn't have any complaints with the match. And Jada Parker is a great choice. So, No Mercy next week should rule. It should kick ass. All right. We got in the opening segment, the second segment, I guess you could say, the Chase University celebration. Everybody thanked Ridge Holland, and they gave him a big hug. Frazier and Axiom wanted a rematch. They said they would only get one if they defeated Riley Osborne and Duke Hudson in a tag team match, which they promptly did. So Nathan Frazier and Axiom defeated Duke Hudson and Riley Osborne in the first match to get a rematch for the tag team titles, but we don't know when that will be. I'm not sure if that's going to be at No Mercy or not. Riley Osborne, he's going to be wrestling at TNA's Emergence pay-per-view. He's going to be in an Ultimate X match. He actually wrestled on the most recent TNA show, and he won a match to get into that Ultimate X match. And he's very tiny, so he fits the kind of guy who would be in an Ultimate X match. So, good for him, right? Match number 2, Lola Vice loses to Wendy Chu. At least they made it make sense. The match was solid enough. Lola Vice, she's still a little rough around the edges, but she's coming along. Kalani Jordan came from the back, got in the ring, it got in the way. Lola Vice ended up backfisting her by mistake. And while she was shocked that she was even in the ring and the referee tried to get Kalani out of the ring, Wendy Chu bashed Lola Vice in the head with her pillow. And then when the referee turned around, she was pinned. Lola Vice was pinned, but she was knocked unconscious, which tells you immediately that something was in the pillow, right? So Kalani Jordan comes back in the ring, attacks Wendy Chu, beats her up, and then we find out that the women's North American title was stashed in the pillow. So technically, Lola Vice got hit in the head with the belt. That was a very interesting twist. So okay, that was good. There has been no explanation why Wendy Chu is behaving the way that she's behaving. We don't know why she's heel all of a sudden. There was no explanation whatsoever, and it's been over a month. Like, it's okay if you don't want to explain it immediately, but it's been over a month. She's been on TV several times now, and we have no real reason to why all of a sudden she's Jack Skellington. Why is this happening? Also, the two of these young ladies will be having a match at No Mercy because Kalani Jordan challenged Wendy Chu to a match. So that's going to happen. All right, we find out that the Triple H, my goodness, if you are following us on social media, since Triple H is stalking us and spying on us on social media, I'm not going to blame Sean for this. I'm going to blame Triple H for this. Yeah, I haven't even said it what it is yet. But I hope you split your pants tomorrow in public, Triple H. Right up the middle. So that everybody can see what you got on underneath. I hope you just embarrass yourself. Fatal Influence. That's the name you decided to come up with for JC James, Fallon Henley, and Jasmine Nix. Now, look, again, don't have a problem with the faction at all. The name is stupid. Fatal Influence. Someone's going to die from bad influence. I guess we're trying to escape bad influence because that was already used, which was a name that was used by, I think, Kazarian and Christopher Daniels. I think they were bad influence in TNA. Fatal Influence? I don't know. I don't like that. I don't like it. This name sucks. Now, the vignette was great. The girls are great, and their heat with the locker room makes sense when you look at this vignette. It was very good. But the name Fatal Influence, it sucks. It sucks. All right, so the theme of this whole gimmick is that Fallon Henley and JC Jane are the grizzled old veterans, even though I don't think either one of them is 30. Well, I think Fallon Henley might be 30. But apparently they're two indie wrestlers who bust their ass to get here. And they got problems with all of these D1 athletes being given, private tryouts to get into WWE while they had to bust their ass for years and years. And they have a problem with that. But they like Jasmine Nix because Jasmine Nix looks up to them and she's going to be a future megastar because of their influence on her. But everybody else, they're going to try to kick their ass. Again, I like this. I think it makes sense. They talked about them being friends, them having a relationship going back to their days on the indies, and it's sensible. Okay? I just don't like the name. I hate the name. I hate it. Jakara Jackson and Lash Legend still take umbrage with the way JC Jane and Fallon Henley have been behaving. And their dislike for the athletes that come in and basically say, hey, it ain't our fault. We're great. That they give us opportunities. And as they are, mocking JC Jane and Fallon Henley, they walk past Lexus King, who has some poor schlub polishing his throne. Lexus King refers to them as the Meta 2 and says they don't need the baggage of Noam Dar and Oro Mensah. Oro Mensah returned just as Lexus King was leaving, and he was disappointed and misses Noam Dar. Okay. I guess they're going to build up this Lexus King Oro Mensah thing. Lexus King just seems to be floating. As an antagonist, he works just fine, but he's a low-level antagonist. Kind of like the Miz of NXT. He's not going to be champion anytime soon from what it looks like. He's going to work mid-card things, and that's about it. Get a little bit of heat, lose, be 50-50 as hell in the mid-card. So I guess he's probably about to do a job for Earl Mint, so they put him back on the rebound. Okie dokie. Hank and Tank defeated Gallows and Anderson. I couldn't have cared less. This match was too long, and I don't like nobody involved. Just too long. A lot of Gallows and Anderson from a face hole, and I don't like it. Shawn Spears talking about how Brooks Jensen was speaking from the heart, but Idris Enofe and Malik Blade thought he was exploiting Brooks. They have some words back and forth before Shawn Spears mentions that these guys stopped being friends with Brinley Reese. And then a fight broke out in which Idris Enofe flattened Shawn Spears. He beat him up. I was like, oh, okay, that's good. That rules. That was very good. Glad to see Idris Enofe getting an opportunity here. Okay. Ashani the Adonis. He was jealous of Dion Lennox. He was straight up hating. He was just hating. Dion Lennox is very excited, and Javon Evans was backstage, just kind of being backstage. He was sitting on top of a box. I don't know why. Ren Sinclair shows up with the Heritage Cup because there was a giant brawl that I haven't gotten to yet, including the cup. And she wanted somebody to look after it while she went back to, I don't know. I forgot what she left him with the cup for. I don't think it made sense, if we're being honest. Out of nowhere, Javon Evans is looking after the cup. He's babysitting the cup for Ren Sinclair. When Gallus shows up and told him he don't know nothing about the style of that cup. He's not even a real wrestler anyway. He does too many flips, which is, they're stealing my material to do wrestling storylines. So Javon Evans, of course, was offended by this. He is a real wrestler. Then Gallus says, well, look, why don't you come hang out with us? You can buy us a pint. We'll teach you something about this business. And then Cedric Alexander showed up and took his side. So Javon Evans and Cedric Alexander, I like it. It's good. I like that. That's useful. It's better than Cedric being partners with Trick Williams. I still don't think they should have broke him up with Ashante the Adonis without fully realizing their characters, but Ashante the Adonis seems to be well on his way to doing something interesting on his own. And before I forget, Ashante the Adonis defeated Dion Lennox. Dion Lennox is the guy who wrestles on Level Up all the time. His gimmick is that he's a smart guy. He's the bookworm that the girls are hot for. He gets their spurs jingling and jangling. He did an alley-oop to Ashante the Adonis in this match. That was amazing and hilarious at the same time because of the way Ashante the Adonis fell. So it was a fine match. It wasn't the best, but this was one of the few times I've seen Dion Lennox, and he was pretty good. The finish was a basic super kick, a Shawn Michaels version of the super kick from Ashante the Adonis, which I thought was pretty solid. You know, nothing. I mean, when everybody using a super kick, you got to have some real balls to use it as your finish, and don't put no real oomph on it, no real stank-a-dank on it. He did the stomps in the corner though, which was, I guess, cool. All right, let's go to Charlie Dempsey. Charlie Dempsey was in the ring talking about Lou Thesz and Billy Robinson and what wrestling means, and that this cup is the oxygen that the No Quarter Catch crew needs. And then Ren Sinclair snatched the microphone from him. Said she has no idea who Lou Robinson and Billy Thesz is. But if Charlie Dempsey says that they're good guys, then they must be good guys. Then Charlie Dempsey told her not to interrupt. He had something he needed to say. Then he started talking about making the cup the most prestigious and honorable championship in NXT. And then Ren Sinclair snatched the microphone again and said that he'll fight anybody, anytime, anywhere. And then the ominous drums of Obafemi started to play. And Ren Sinclair hilariously apologized for running her mouth, as Charlie Dempsey was very upset. Obafemi said his title was the most prestigious because he is the most dominant. He talked about beating all these former champions and said he does not mind adding a cup holder to his list. This, of course, triggers Tony D'Angelo, who comes out Charlie Dempsey thought that Tony D'Angelo wanted a rematch for the Heritage Cup. Turns out he did not. He had his eyes on Obafemi instead, but said that, the rest of the family, well, they want revenge for what Charlie Dempsey did. And so he snapped his fingers and a brawl broke out. And basically, Stax and Luca attacked No Quarter Cash crew while Tony D'Angelo stood off with Obafemi, and they brawled, and he spine-busted Obafemi. He actually took Obafemi down and teased holding the championship, and I was extremely excited by this. I like Tony D'Angelo. I like Obafemi. I like what they're doing here. Tony D'Angelo got screwed over, and he's like, oh, I might as well be moving up the card. Why go back to that Heritage Cup thing? I don't need that thing. It's for guys like Dempsey anyway who want to do catch wrestling. Let him do that. Let him do that catch wrestling. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to flip their lid about Vince Sinclair not knowing who Luther is and Billy Robinson is. But I would imagine both of those guys have been dead long enough that somebody of her age group probably don't know who they are anyway. So I thought it fits. It also fits that she's delusional and she's in a group that's about catch wrestling and grappling, and yet she seemingly knows nothing about it, and she's just being delusional and annoying. She's being very annoying. But she's adding to the humor of the group, so it's working out. So the question is, which one of these guys is going to end up challenging Dempsey for the cup? I'm pretty sure it's going to be Stax, who is probably as good a wrestler, if not better, than Tony D'Angelo in the ring. Stax has a lot of potential. He's very Ludwig Kaiser coded in this position, where just the fact that he's been in Tony D'Angelo's corner has covered up how good he actually is at not only cutting promos, but actually wrestling. And when he's on his own, I think he's going to be something special. But Tony D'Angelo and Obafemi, I'm all about that. I'm all in on that. Now, let's talk about the main event. Wes Lee cut a promo on Pete Dunne, with whom he says he's going to smack him back to Raw. Then he says that Joe Hendry is just here for the NXT rub. He's going to beat him, send him back to the rest of those clowns in TNA. He said the pinnacle of Joe Hendry's career was at the bottom of his, and that Joe Hendry is basically nothing. Joe Hendry overheard this, cut a promo by saying he is motivated by the fact that Wes Lee thinks that TNA is full of clowns. Then he said this 10-year odyssey he's been on has been making believers all over the world. But now it's time for him to make a believer out of himself. He is going to win this match and go on to face Ethan Page at No Mercy. Ethan Page, for his troubles, did not want to entertain the idea of even wrestling Joe Hendry because he doesn't work here, and therefore doesn't even see him as a real contender. He was then confronted by Pete Dunne, who says that all the former NXT champions have been afraid of him, and that once he wins this triple threat match, he's going to break Ethan Page's fingers and his ego. This takes us to the main event, where Ethan Page was at ringside, and this was actually an important bit. It wasn't just that he was at ringside just to be there. He actually adds something to the match at this point. So, Wes Lee, Pete Dunne, Joe Hendry, the main event. Really great finish here. Joe Hendry hits his finisher, which is, I think it's called the standing ovation, on Pete Dunne. 1, 2, Ethan Page yanks the referee out of the ring. Referee, of course, is pissed, but it's no disqualification. What can you do? Ethan Page is arguing with the referee. Their back is turned when Pete Dunne hits the bitter end on Joe Hendry. But there's no referee. As he gets up to try to get the referee, Pete Dunne turns his back just for a second. Trick Williams gets into the ring, hits his trick shot knee on Pete Dunne. Joe Hendry recovers, lays on top of Pete Dunne. 1, 2, 3. Joe Hendry won the match. Now, you may ask yourself, where was Wes Lee? He had gotten powerbombed through a table, so he was already out. So Joe Hendry of TNA is going to wrestle in the main event of an NXT pay-per-view. And wow, who would have thought that? Like, that's a really cool idea that they got here. Of course, it's, similar in nature to the Jordan Grace match. I don't expect Joe Hendry to win. I would be shocked if he won. But anything's possible in the World Wrestling Federation. Anything's possible. After the match, Wesley was disappointed that he had gotten powerbombed through a table and thus was not decided in the finish. It wouldn't matter to him anyway, as Zachary Wentz jumped from the crowd and attacked him after the show was going off the air. And they were brawling as the show going off the air. And it was hinted that these two guys are going to wrestle each other also at No Mercy. So the TNA guys have gotten some pretty good spots on WWE pay-per-view. This is very solid. This is really good shit that they got going on here. My frustration at Trick Williams not being on the show, because I had a whole thing in my head as the match was going on, like, man, I can't believe Trick Williams. It went a whole episode without even doing a vignette for Trick Williams. They did nothing to promote this guy. And then he pops up right at the very end. I was like, oh, okay, well, at least he was there for a reason, But his thing with Pete Dunne is continuing. Okay, fine. But I'm really jazzed up about the Joe Hendry, Ethan Page match. Now, as we transition into the news and notes portion, the TNA talent feel much better about this partnership with WWE than they did actually with their partnership with AEW. And USA Today did an entire article on this thing where Trey Miguel said, quote, "The last time we did one of these crossovers or like working with another brand, it was very, very, very one-sided, in my opinion. I don't think TNA saw benefits from it." And he says, but this time it's been quite the opposite. And he says TNA wins because we're selling out regularly now. This is Joe Hendry talking. And are getting so big. We're gaining so much from the increased exposure. And WWE, a lot of their NXT talents are getting the opportunity to perform in front of a different audience. The wrestlers win and the fans win because it's an exciting product. And I agree with all of this stuff, by the way. I think all of this is very good. And I think people forgot how the partnership with AEW went, where basically Kenny Omega popped up on TNA. He won their world title immediately after. I think they might have one match before that. Won their world title immediately. Then, beat everybody in the company. Lost the title without losing to a TNA talent. Instead, he lost to Christian, who then lost to a TNA talent. No other TNA talent was allowed to go over to AEW except the Good Brothers. You had the women begging to go over there. Deonna Purrazzo and Jordan Grace. They were trying so hard to get on Dynamite. They were even bringing in people from NWA onto Dynamite. But when it came to TNA, they had no room. They were full. We got no more room for you. We got your world title here, though. But we got no room for you. We got no room for your talent. We don't have no interest in working with you guys for real. No features of the X Division title. No storylines that really involve in them. Nothing. And Tony Khan was cutting promos about how terrible TNA was on TNA's television, really denigrating them and their talent. And I see why they believe that it was one-sided. I get why they believe that. Zachary Wentz would say, it seems like both sides are so happy with everything that's going on, and that's kind of rare to see in wrestling. The vibes now are just immaculate. Everybody knows that Gail Kim works backstage at Impact. But apparently, whenever a TNA talent is featured on NXT, she's also backstage at NXT. And she's talked about how they respected her, they listened to her, and all that kind of stuff. And she feels uplifted and empowered and all this, all these empty words with this new partnership. So it seems like everybody's happy. There's no real complaints. There is a lot of complaints from the fans, though, because people are saying, well, look, you're getting the best talent from TNA on NXT, but you're not giving the best talent to TNA. And I say, well, yes, you're right about that. The talent trade probably isn't fair. I mean, they sent Dante Chen to TNA. They sent, Riley Osborne. There has to be somebody who is not doing anything in NXT that you could send over to TNA. But at the same time, though, we don't know how long this thing is going to go on. Like, it might seem like this, they're doing sort of a storyline with TNA versus NXT right now because of the promo last week from Wes Lee. And a lot of people heard that promo, they took it out of context, and they was like, oh, now they got NXT guys doing promos denigrating TNA, talking about how TNA guys were bums and all this kind of stuff. He just did it again this week by saying that TNA was full of clowns. But this guy came from TNA. He worked there for years. This is not somebody who's never worked there, clowning the company. He worked in TNA. And the reason why he's denigrating TNA is because that's where his friends are. And he's not friends with those guys anymore. He's basically trying to big league his friends by saying, you guys aren't in here in the WWE anymore. Best of luck on your future endeavors. He's not really like denigrating TNA like the company sucks. He's bitter about the situation that's going on here. But a lot of people don't watch NXT. They didn't really follow the product. They just look at it and say, oh, well, what is TNA getting out of this thing, man? You just got Wes Lee cutting promos while he's a big-time WWE superstar and everybody else is a small fry. It's like, yeah, but there's a specific reason why he's doing that. He's talking about how those two guys are having fun in TNA without him. And so his idea is, well, screw you guys and fuck TNA. That's kind of his mentality because he's turning heel. And it's supposed to be getting heel heat because you're not supposed to just be like, fuck TNA for no reason. TNA is a partner now, and they're showing you that stuff is going to have repercussions because they had Zachary once attack Wes Lee on this show. And of course, they value TNA because they're pushing a TNA guy and Joe Hendry to the top of the card. He's not going to win, more than likely, but he's there. So I think people are taking that stuff out of context. Even though I know that sometimes the TNA fans can be very sensitive due to how things worked out with AEW. I get it. That you might be like, oh, they're going to big league us. It's just WWE big leaguing us all over again. It's like, it's just one guy doing that. Literally, it's one guy who used to work there. And he's worked on that show recently. Like I think he's worked as a member of the Rascals 2 or 3 times on TNA since this partnership began. So, and plus the whole thing is about his friends leaving him, and he's like, well, I'm in the WWE. You guys can go back to TNA. Go back to TNA where you came from. You bums, you clowns, you dirt clods. So all of that was fine. I like the partnership. The only thing I will say is, yes, you probably do need to at some point have a higher level NXT talent go over to TNA. Not just the not even mid, the lower card guys. They haven't even had like a solid mid carder go over to TNA yet. But I think if this thing can continue, in due time, you will see somebody major go to NX from NXT to TNA. And I think Bound for Glory would be a very special time for that. And now that I think Mustafa Ali is done with TNA, you have an open spot, somebody to wrestle Mike Bailey, maybe a Pete Dunne or somebody like that could really be fun for the TNA audience. But if you think that all of a sudden, Cody Rhodes is going to pop up in TNA, it's like, no. No. You might get AJ Styles, because I'm thinking that they're probably going to put AJ Styles in the Hall of Fame. So he might pop up at Bound for Glory in 2024. I hope so, because it's going to be in Detroit. And I plan to be there, because it's going to be on my alma mater, Wayne State University. So I plan to be in attendance at Bound for Glory this year. So I hope they do a Hall of Fame for AJ Styles, and he gets to wrestle one final match in TNA. That would rule. That would kick ass. I may even go to the TV tapings if they're going to have it somewhere in the same building or something. Now, last little bit I want to discuss before we wrap it up. There were some complaints. So there's always some complaints. There were some complaints about maybe Joe Hendry being overexposed. I think last week he was on the show quite a few times. I think he was on the show 3 or 4 times. He had like 3 or 4 different segments. And people was like, look, man, they're utilizing him a little too much. And, with the big, long segment he had a couple of weeks ago where he was singing a song, and then he pops up 2 or 3 times per episode. Are we doing too much with Joe Hendry? And I think once you take into account that he doesn't really work there, at least not officially, they're just trying to get the most out of it. And because it's over, they're trying to get the most out of it. They're trying to really squeeze the juice out of this thing. And putting him in the main event of the pay-per-view, you can see that the time that they've invested in him is not going to be wasted. So it's not like you're going to invest all of this time in this guy and then not utilize him higher up on the card. They're investing all of this time in him so that they could utilize him as a main event talent. Heavens to Bessie, he might actually win the title. I doubt it, but he might. You never know. And they just want to make sure that he's familiar to the audience. And I think, if somebody's on the screen that often, you do kind of ask the question about overexposure. And I hate to compare this because some people are very low IQ, but Steve Austin and The Rock and those guys will often be on Raw pretty regularly. They were super over, and you would utilize other people to enhance what they're doing, because if The Rock is on the screen, people are paying attention. And that's kind of how they've been using Joe Hendry. Like, he's the most over guy on the show. If we put him in a segment, even if it's just a backstage segment with him talking to somebody, people will pay attention. And then you have an opportunity to hold people a lot longer. Not only is it better for your ratings, but now you could put other people on the screen with him that he can interact with and maybe give some of the rub. So I understand why people might be afraid that he's being overexposed, but I don't think we've gotten to that point yet. And I think that ultimately, with him becoming the number 1 contender for the NXT title, it's useful in furthering the story that they're trying to tell with him, is that, he's his 10-year odyssey. But a lot of people also just hate him because they don't think he's a great wrestler, or they don't think he's a good enough wrestler. But you know how that is. That's typical AEW fan. They hate everything, hate everybody. They were just recently hating on Ricky Starks. Ricky Starks no good, and Ethan Page, I agree with him, he sucks. But Joe Hendry is serviceable. He's not terrible. He's not great. It is what it is. So I can understand why you may think he's overhyped. Okay. NXT, really fun show. Had a blast with it. Jada Parker versus Roxanne Perez is going to be money. Trick Williams versus Pete Dunne, I guess that's going to be fine. But Wentz and Wesley is going to be great. Oba Femi and Tony D'Angelo, that's going to be amazing too. I think fucking No Mercy might end up being 4 hours, bro. What a great show they got lined up. But let me know what you guys think. And I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.
No one does it better.